Let's see. Hi, Brittany. Hi. Just here answering questions. If you guys have any questions about psych meds, you can go for it. Good, thanks. Do I work with people in Illinois? I will soon. We have a medical license in Illinois, and just waiting to get a DEA there. But if you don't need controlled substances, we're good for Illinois. You can send us an email. How am I tonight? Yeah, doing good. I'm up late. I'm having a hard time sleeping, which usually happens for me in May. I'm very sensitive to light, and and so I figured I'd click on the live feed. So let's see. Can a functional neurologist diagnose ADD? I think anyone can diagnose ADD. It's a clinical diagnosis usually. Okay, well, we've got lots of questions coming in. Got severe anhedonia and anxiety from being on 3 to 4 meds in a year. What should I do? It's torturous every day. Find someone to help you do a slow taper. That seems to be the best thing to do because otherwise they'll just say you have treatment-resistant depression, and it could potentially be a drug issue. And so I'd find someone to help. Brittany, yep, not in Oregon. Can gabapentin be used to treat schizophrenia symptoms because of its mechanism of action? Not typically. It's not usually thought of as a medication for psychosis. Okay, let's see. He sent me an email today, and were you talking about Illinois? Because we may not have. If you're in Illinois and you're not on controlled substances, we're good. You can reach out to us again. Let's see. Oh wow, we got lots coming in. All right. What's my opinion on lithium? Probably the same with a lot of the psychiatric meds. It depends on how it's used. I like lithium orotate, like super low doses for people with irritability, but lithium is probably one of the better moods. If out of the mood stabilizers, maybe one of the better ones, despite its problems. I probably like it a bit more than Depakote. Let's see. What reverses the side effects of benzodiazepines long term? Let's see. Time, coming off the medication and giving yourself time to recover. Yeah, fatigue, 18 months off clonazepam, that can be normal. Yeah, especially if you've had a protracted injury or bad withdrawal. Okay, let's see. Are you going to have Healy back on? Any updates on PSSD? I'd love to have Healy back on. I guess the updates on PSSD is they are actually calling people from the community with PSSD. This is the FDA, by the way. And so they're actually doing an assessment. I think they're caving to a lot of public pressure, all of the stuff in the New York Times lately. And so I think I think they'll probably fall in line with the other regulators and acknowledge it soon. I mean, that's my suspicion. If not, then that'll be ugly. Do you think any natural remedies such as ashwagandha are helpful for anxiety? Monica, I wish I could give you better advice on that. I'm not really sure about those. I like, natural remedies. Let me think. For anxiety. I wouldn't say I'm the best person to talk to about nutraceuticals, honestly. I like lithium orotate for irritability. That helps me with anxiety. But then it's just, the regular stuff, exercise, getting enough steps per day, eating well, not, overdoing it on like the caffeine and the nicotine. Okay. Good for you, Josh. That's awesome. Congratulations on coming off. Let's see. Therapist Jen. Okay, I know Therapist Jen. What are some ideas for depression? Wow. Okay. That's Brittany, that's a really complicated question there. It really depends where it's coming from, right? And so if you think that it's rooted in your, life hardship and things like that, you want to be looking at your life. I mean, if it's loneliness or if it's interpersonal, seeing a therapist is great. If it's finding purpose, well, I mean, if it's career related, I think people should go and see career counselors. If you're just depressed and it's coming out of nowhere, I always think about lifestyle modifications and then looking for medical problems. Okay. Thanks, Bria. That's really kind. What do you do if you've been drugged since you were a kid till adulthood? Well, if the meds aren't working for you, you still have hope, Camilla, because every day I help people who come to me and they've been put on meds when they were teenagers, and we're unwinding them. In fact, one of the coaches in my clinic, Trudy, was put on meds when she was 19, mood stabilizers and antipsychotics, and she was able to come off with lifestyle modifications. And so that was possible for her. And so it is possible for some people. I did an interview with her on my channel. If you just search interview with Trudy, and she was drugged for 2 decades and came off. Yeah, D, that can happen. I've brought these down to the present dose. You know what? Gabapentin, I don't. Here's the thing, like if you're having side effects from meds, like let's say like protracted withdrawal and you've got nerve pain and things like that, the thing that I get really worried about when it comes to, using something like gabapentin to treat the symptoms, or, introducing another drug to treat something like anxiety is the drugs just wear off eventually, and then you end up with another dependency. And so you end up in this place where, I wish I had better news, and I was like, there's this thing, and it's going to be low risk, and it's not going to mess you up in the future, but I can't. You kind of have to, if you've had one of the protracted injuries, or you've had a neurological side effect, I always think it's better just to wait for your body to recover if it does. Usually it does if it's protracted, and try and avoid adding additional things. Okay. Bro dog, okay. Is there any advice on how to differentiate if severe anhedonia is due to depression itself? It's one of these things where, I mean, one, I would say, like, have you always had like severe anhedonia when you were like a kid, when you were growing up, or did it kind of pop up after, several years on the drug? I mean, if that's the case, if you had it before, then, it might be more biologically based. If it happened when you've been on the meds, it's pointing more towards the meds. But but Brodog, I'm often in this situation with clients, patients. They come to me and they go, well, what if I really need it? And the truth is, you don't really know if the symptoms are drug related, especially if it's like low motivation, apathy, numbing, until you start to peel the drugs off and then kind of see what's going on underneath it. And so, because the best way to really know if something is drug related is to remove the drug slowly and give your brain a chance to heal. And so I wish there was a way to know in advance, but usually you just have to sort of peel the drugs off in a very careful way and then see what's underneath. Well, Sterling, cheers. Anyone in Kentucky for diazepam tapering? I think so. I had a video on how to find help for tapering, and so James, I would go to Benzo Information Coalition and look who's listed in Kentucky. Another great place to find doctors would be Psychiatry Redefined. There's a provider directory there for people in the, well, it's actually international, and they're all functional medicine psychiatrists, and so they're going to be much wiser to this type of stuff. What reverses the side effects of long-term benzo use? Time is what reverses the side effects. And please don't be discouraged if it takes you a year or two for them to sort of for you to bounce back. That's really normal. That's just the mind recovering from them, and just hang in there. You've mentioned that SSRIs can add up to giving individuals low-level depression all the time. Would love to hear more about that. Can't remember the term. Yeah, Brittany. So it's something called Tardive dysphoria, and it's been it's in the medical literature. It's described by a guy called Riff El Malik, and I did a video. It's probably like 2 weeks ago. It was the long-term effects of antidepressants on the brain. If you go to the last 10 minutes of that video, do a deep dive on tardive dysphoria. But I mean, and the way I think about it is, well, one, it's in the literature. So Giovanni Fava and Riff Al-Malik, both American professors, have just been noticing that some people will become chronically depressed when they take these meds long term, and it won't look anything like the depression that they originally had. They proposed a diagnostic criteria, but the long and the short of it is, when people take, especially the blunting antidepressants long term, a small proportion of them will start talking about feeling like very numb and disconnected and having low motivation and high anxiety in the background. And it's anxiety that's not anchored to anything. And when they get into that state, bumping the dose doesn't seem to help, adding new drugs doesn't seem to help, and they start to tell people they have treatment-resistant depression. But they don't consider that it could be drug-related. And there's, most drugs, when you take them long-term, for some people, they'll have, neurological effects on the brain. So with the antipsychotics, they get tardive dyskinesia, which is the involuntary mouth movements and the cognitive problems. With lithium, you get silent syndrome, which can be, it almost looks like dementia. And with benzos, you get bind. People get more anxious and they develop neuropathy. And so tardive dysphoria is the SSRI version of that. Really, the only drugs that I'm not seeing any real long-term consequences for in terms of neurological injuries tend to be the stimulants. So people on ADHD meds and Wellbutrin. I don't think I've seen one person come to my clinic with problems from those. And so there's something about the drugs that are more sedating and lower anxiety that seem to be more harmful in the long run. But Brittany, yeah, you can go check out that video called "The Long-Term Effects of Antidepressants on the Brain." Yeah, David, that sounds awful. That's what that can feel like. Okay. Hi, Angie. Anyone on several psych meds for 40 years come off and be normal? I don't think I've quite helped someone personally who's had 40 years, but I have helped a lot of people who have been on for 30 years, and I have helped people who are in their 60s and 70s, and Nicole has helped people who are in their 80s, and they bounce back. The problem is when you've been I think when you've been on meds for 40 years, you're usually older, and it just takes longer because your brain is less plastic. And so you just have to kind of chip away and go slowly. And I know everyone sort of wants certainty here because it's so scary to consider doing withdrawal coming off. But if you just do it slowly, it can be safe, and you just you have to see what happens as you go down. But we've helped lots of people in their 60s and 70s come down, and they're doing just fine. Let's see. If you recommend anyone in the UK, yeah, Dr. Horowitz is the man. Go and see him. Okay. I was reading a post about SSRIs causing gender dysphoria. Have I seen that in my practice? Well, when I talk to the guys who have PSSD, so I did the interviews are on the channel. One was with Simon Wright, that's WRIGH, and the other one IGHT, and the other one was with Carlton. Carlton was the first ever interview on the channel. Both those guys told me that they thought they were gay after they developed PSSD because it was so confusing for them. Now, that's not quite gender dysphoria, but it's definitely a change in sexuality in men who were, previously never questioned their sexuality. I mean, the thing about the gender dysphoria is, I don't know if it's gender dysphoria, but I suspect the drugs are doing something with sexuality because when when David Healy put his citizens petition into EMA and all the regulators, there was a whole section in there. It was a systematic review on what had happened to mice who were exposed to antidepressants in utero and as juveniles. And the mice had altered sexual behavior. And this wasn't just one study, this was multiple studies in mice. And so when I see something like that, I go, could this be something that could happen in humans? And there's a big uptick in people identifying as, different, sexualities and genders now. Some of it's definitely, could be, wider social acceptance. It could be social contagion. But it may also have something to do with SSRIs coming onto the market about 30 years ago. Wait, no, longer than that, nearly 30 years ago. Yeah, like 35 years ago. And so we put a lot of kids on this stuff, and moms are taking it when they have kids. So, I do think it's a question that we need to look at. The other thing, Christian, that was kind of disturbing was when Yazi Priani did her study. This was the one in the New York Times. It found that 30% of people in the LGBTQ community were on antidepressant medications, which is a lot. If you consider that in general, adults in the US, it's about 14%, so nearly double if you're in that community. But then even within that community, they did a survey and they said, well, how many people experienced ongoing sexual dysfunction when they came off? It was 10%. Which is crazy. That's a crazy number of people to say they experienced enduring sexual dysfunction afterwards. And so, that also makes me kind of think about, is there something about PSSD, enduring sexual dysfunction, that's also making people confused, like Simon and Carlton. So it is, it's something that I worry about. Coffee's keeping me from sleeping. I'm still tapering. Peace and rhyme, good stuff. I think, people are going to hate this. Everyone always hates when I say this. I think coffee and nicotine, caffeine and nicotine, they're not good. They bump your anxiety, they impair your sleep, and we totally normalize their use. But by and large, people feel better when they come off them. They sleep better. They go, oh my God, I'm sleeping like a teenager again. And then they have very stable focus throughout the day. And so good for you. What are my thoughts on microdosing psychedelics? I found it reverse desensitizations from SSRIs, even when I don't continue to microdose. John, that's really interesting. I don't like microdosing if you do it every day, but I have no problem with it if you just do it kind of every now and then. That's the same way I feel about psychedelics. I have a much more favorable opinion on psychedelics than daily psychiatric meds, because the way I guess they're meant to be used is with therapy to facilitate some kind of new insight or breakthrough. And so that sounds reasonable to me. You're on 30 milligrams of Mert for sleep for a couple of years, gained a lot of weight. Also taking antidepressants and Valium. How can I get off the mirtazapine? I would just do so Christy, if you go and check out the video that we put out about a month ago, it's called Beginner's Guide to Tapering Off Psychiatric Meds. But what you might end up doing is turning that 30 of mirtazapine into a compounded liquid. And then if you follow the instructions in that video, you can gradually just lower it down. It might take a year or so to come off it if you want to do it smoothly, but you can. Let's see, I've been on citalopram, 10 milligrams for a total of 10 years and tried to get off and was injured about 2 years ago. Back on, feel worse now from that toxic buildup. Brittany, I'm so sorry that happened. Make sure when you do attempt your taper again, try do a liquid micro taper, and it's okay if it takes you, 18 months, 2 years to come off. Just do it really, really slowly next time. But that must have been really demoralizing. I'm so sorry that happened. Josh, yeah, if you put in a interview request through the website Taper Clinic, the team looks at them. We don't take all of the interview requests. It sort of depends on what we're covering at the moment. But if you've got one in there, the team has looked at it. And if we don't feature you on the channel, we'll send you, I guess, a regret to inform or something like that. But if you do put it in, I appreciate that. I love it when people put in interview requests and they want to share their stories. Well, Lindsay, Elmos, if you feel very good, is that unusual? I don't know. There's not enough information there. I'm glad you're feeling better. Like, as long as it's not like verging on mania and euphoria, you might just be sort of feeling like your usual self potentially, or in some kind of mild rebound. I mean, to come off after 30 years, even after a year off, you're probably still gonna have your brain sort of readjusting. And so, as long as you're feeling safe, I'd say ride it out. Devra, I can ask her. How about you just send us an email to info@taperclinic.com and just say, request for interview from Trudy, and just specifically put like what you'd want her to talk about, because she has a really big heart, and I'm sure if she saw that, she'd give it a good think. Okay. Cindy from Illinois. My last taper is gabapentin. So you cold turkeyed and Klonopin, then put on Ativan and Remeron. What can I expect for withdrawal, and how do I taper? No more brain injury. I'm not quite sure which one you're withdrawing off now. I'm going to assume it's Ativan and Remeron. So if you've had a withdrawal injury, that's just going to run its course, and you may have, depending on how bad it is, I mean, you could have symptoms for some time. You're going to be sensitive to withdrawal if you've been hurt, and so you need to go slowly. Don't be discouraged if you're having symptoms, because that's just your brain healing, and just kind of gradually wean yourself off. Again, if you look at the Beginner's Guide to Tapering Off Psych Meds video that I put out recently, it will kind of walk you through all of that. Ashwagandha gave me too much energy and anxiety. There is something that's kind of bothersome about ashwagandha. Man, what's it called? I had a guy on the channel talking about a lion's mane injury, and so I know lion's mane can sometimes cause something called PSSD. But then this guy Lucas, I think he has a YouTube channel, Boost Your Biology. I had him on recently, and he had, I think he had an ashwagandha injury. And if you search on like Reddit or Google, ashwagandha syndrome, sometimes they, I think it's a thing. So ashwagandha can make some people worse. Okay. All right. Well, we got so many things. What do you think of Wellbutrin? Let's see. Okay. Let's see. Molly says, how can I support my clients who are taking meds? I want to refer them to your vids, but afraid of giving medical advice. I guess you're a therapist. Oh man, we're getting so many comments here. I can't read some of them. Molly, just go for it. Send them to the meds and just do what feels right to you. I definitely know a lot about feeling ostracized by my peers, and I actually just felt a lot better when I was just more open about who I was and what I believed in, and then people kind of knew what I was about, and the people who sort of stayed with me were the ones where that was okay, and the people who left, and that was fine. Okay. If you have chronic pain, is it possible to taper off meds? It's hard to know which it's hard to know, without additional questions, but I would say yes, it is possible to taper off, because meds, the problem with meds, even for pain, is that they wear off over time. But it's sort of a individualized situation. I'd need to know more about your situation to advise on that. What do I think of low dose ketamine? I think it's been quite helpful for some people. So I know it works for some folks, but like all psychiatric drug interventions, if you start using it every day, I always worry about tolerance in the long term, and then it's going to wear off, and then you end up sort of with your original problems, and the drug's not working. Angie Raditz, I hope you have you're going to feel more emotions. You're going to feel more connected in your life, and you won't have to worry about going to a pharmacy. That's what you have to look forward to if you come off. Can long-term benzos cause permanent damage? Unfortunately, yes, for some people. Yeah. Let's see. Haley Green. You don't need to go onto Valium to do a taper. You can space out your Ativan. You could try do it 3 times a day and then just gradually lower it down. Monish, I'm 34. Yeah. Be 30. I'll be 35 on June 1st. So in I guess less than a month. Let's see. Do I face criticism from fellow psychiatrists because of my views? Yeah, I do, and a lot of patients as well. If you follow me over on X, every now and then you see, a bunch of different professors from institutions just slamming me. I mean, the most recent one was I was talking about the possibility of psychiatric medications leading to mania, psychosis, and mass murder. Essentially, people did not like that, and so they came and bashed me. But we get it from patients as well. Some patients really don't like the message, and they'll sort of follow me around and they post the website for the Utah Medical Board, and they go, everyone, let's report Dr. Josef. He's really bad. We should take away his license. And so, yes, saying these things definitely puts a big target on my back. So far, I'm okay because I think I'm doing a good job at looking after my patients. But yes, you attract a lot of bad attention. That said, the US is like a pretty good place for, at least right now, for freedom of speech if you're like a doctor, because of all of the COVID stuff. All of those doctors who are talking about the risks have kind of been vindicated now, when all of the side effects from the COVID vaccine are coming out. That I think there's a wider recognition that medical freedom of speech for doctors should be respected, and so I feel a bit safer. Yeah. The missing sock, dude, I have bind. It's horrible. Nobody believes it's real. Thanks for believing us. I know it's super isolating to have one of these things, and people just think it's anxiety, and they're just like, oh, just push yourself through it. It's like, no, I feel like I've fallen out like the side of a building and smacked my head. It's not going to work. And so I'm really sorry you're in that. Just hang in there, man, and it will get better over time. Am I Mexican? I think I think I look ambiguous, like ethnically. I talked to my wife about it, and she's like, I don't know where I'd place you, and she's like, maybe Mexican. No, my dad is Austrian, and my mom is Chinese Malay, and I guess that's what created this, but not Mexican. Yeah. Can you describe SSRI protracted withdrawal symptoms? Unshackled Mind 786. Yeah, there's a lot of different ones. Man, I talked to a young lady this morning who did an intake at our clinic, and I'd say, she had the works. She had like the severe anxiety where you just feel like you're like in doom, like you're just in this, like everything just feels like terrible and you can't break away from the terrible anxious thoughts. You can have the cognitive impairment. She was getting like muscle spasms and jerks when she was going to sleep. She developed a whole bunch of gastrointestinal problems like diarrhea, tremors, this sort of sense of inner vibrating. Yeah, it was really, really bad. Do I recommend a doctor in Canada? I don't. People in the chat, if anyone in the chat knows a doctor in Canada, can you share it for Fernando? I would just say go. If you go on the YouTube channel, there's a video called "How to Find Help for Tapering," and it goes through all of the. This was probably like 6 weeks to 2 months ago. It goes through all of the directories. But I tell you what, I talked to a lot of people from Canada, and the doctors there really aren't that interested. Can you talk about how people should get off antipsychotic meds? Yeah, antipsychotic meds it's kind of it's I'd say it's easier if you're on antipsychotics because of depression, because most people who get diagnosed with depression, it's based on life hardship. The antipsychotic tapers, which are more touch and go for me, are the people who have bipolar disorder and schizophrenia. And so with those folks, you need to try and get them to a place where they're not having symptoms anymore. And sometimes that's not possible. I mean, some folks will just have symptoms of psychosis, and then it may not be possible to completely come off. But the ways you would treat the psychosis in them is you'd want to try the ketogenic diet. That would be the first thing to do. That's been super effective for people. And then there's ways you can try and cope with psychotic symptoms that are more mental and are less about the medications. There's something called CBT for psychosis. There's also groups like the Hearing Voices Network. And they're not so much about like getting the symptoms to go away, but it's like, how do you live with symptoms of psychosis? And so you have to find something to either get rid of the symptoms or help you cope with them better. And then you would just taper the antipsychotic, just like any other med. What is bind? So bind is benzodiazepine induced neurological dysfunction. It can happen in two ways. Okay, so actually, first, what it looks like is it's a neurotoxicity. So people will get really anxious. They'll have cognitive impairment. They'll have like ringing ears, light sensitivity. Like sometimes their heart beats like crazy, and they have gastrointestinal problems and like tingling in their hands and feet. It's really awful. Happens in two ways. For most people, I see it happens when they get rapidly tapered off a benzodiazepine, and it will hit them. But I'm seeing more and more people where it's just gradually happening after long-term use, and sometimes not even that long. I mean, one of the saddest things that I've seen was that last year, almost back to back, we enrolled 2 women into the taper clinic who were put on benzodiazepines for insomnia for perimenopausal symptoms. One of them was only on Xanax for about 6 months, and she developed bind. And so her nervous system was super sensitized, and she had a hell of a time coming off. I think she's still coming off. She was with us for a year, but yeah, she was so sick and disabled that I think her tape has taken her about 18 months. It's not that it's not common at all to develop it from long-term use, but if it does happen to you, then it's really awful. Yeah, thanks. Thank you to all the people just saying that they appreciate the channel. I mean, that means a lot. Thank you. Cam, how do I feel about doctors prescribing Seroquel for a sleep aid? I think that's bullshit, Cam. I think that's really dangerous, my friend. Because if you pick up the label for Seroquel, it's right there in the warnings and precautions. It talks about tardive dyskinesia, which can be a potentially permanent movement disorder that doesn't go away. It's highly correlated with cognitive impairment in studies as well. And on the label, it says it can happen on low doses even after short periods of time. And so I do not think we should be putting people on Seroquel as a sleep aid. I don't like sleep aids in general because, like all of the meds, I worry about dependence, and then they just wear off and then you're trapped. But I think benzos should be avoided, Ambien, antipsychotics for sure. Unfortunately, as much as I dislike, I've taken some trazodone, so I know it can give you a nasty hangover. Trazodone's probably the one that's the least likely to cause serious problems. Maggie says, any thoughts on teens taking antidepressants, making them go crazy? Yeah, one of the big problems with younger people taking antidepressants is that they're sort of distractible, and they have busy lives, and they forget to take them consistently. And if you're not taking them consistently, you go into interdose, and you have mood swings, and it can make you suicidal. I have heard of the SSRIs causing infertility problems. You'd want to follow up with the PSSD network. Some of the guys there have had their sperm tested after they developed PSSD, and there were problems there. Is it harmful for a pregnant? Oh, I lost that one. But I think it was, is it harmful for a pregnant woman to be on antipsychotics in the last 3 months of the pregnancy and during breastfeeding? Well, the antipsychotics will cross into the placenta and the child will be exposed. Same as with the breast milk. It will all cross into the milk. I suspect probably the most troubling time to be on medications is during the formation of the neural tube, which happens before 8 weeks. So it's really right after conception. A lot of the nervous system is done by the third trimester. So some hard rage, you're a reg in Perth. Well, good stuff. Glad that you're down there. Are there any groups in Australia? So the main people in Australia are, I think it's John Giordini. I think he's the guy in Melbourne or Adelaide, somewhere down there. But you can search John Giordini, and he's really involved in Critical Psych Network in Australia. The other guy that I know of is over in Brisbane. His name's Rob Persay, and you could reach out to him. But there's more people. There's also a guy called Niall or Jock McLaren. He's written a whole bunch of books. He's very irreverent. He's funny, but he's a really sweet, nice guy. And so there's a couple good Aussies down there that have been doing this for decades. You could reach out to them and say, how can I connect with like-minded trainees? Are ADHD meds safe long-term from, um, I would say, kind of yes. And I mean, that might sound unusual, but I have to just go with what I'm seeing in my practice. I'm not seeing people come to me with like neurological problems from ADHD meds. I don't think I've seen a single person. So I don't know if it's fully safe, but it's definitely not a problem like the benzos are. I'd say the benzos seem to be the nastiest, followed by the SSRIs, and then the antipsychotics. But despite the use of benzos going down and less of them being prescribed, it's still the majority of my practice. There's something really bad about the benzos. Yeah. Is Wellbutrin safe at lower doses? Yes, it is. I'd say Wellbutrin is one of the safer antidepressants when it comes to neurological damage. I don't see cases like that. The main things you want to worry about with Wellbutrin would be things like manic switching and irritability, which you're much less likely to have at a low dose. Hey, Cassie, how's Marissa? Marissa's my wife. She's doing really good. And yeah, update on Marissa. Let's see. What to say about her? She's healthy, doing good. Family's great. Thanks for asking. Do I have any thoughts on like Sulvorexant and the other melatonin type drugs? I'm not that familiar with them. My hunch is that they're going to be safer than the benzos, and so I think benzos and Ambien, I mean, they're like the same. And so if you're going to take one of the melatonin drugs, just from what I know about the mechanism of action, I think that's going to be less troublesome if you need to be on something. The LDS love their psych meds. That was really interesting. So I'm in Utah. Lots of Mormons, lots of LDS here. I was not aware that this state uses more psychiatric medications than any other. I think it's the highest the highest users of the meds. And then people will point to the church and they go, yeah, it's the LDS religion. It's um, I guess there's a cult. Some. I think the church people say there's a culture of perfectionism. Like it's like you can't complain and you can't have problems, and that's like ingrained in them. And there's also this like very religious tilt to it where they um they'll say things like, if you're very godly, like good things will happen to you. You'll make money, and all this kind of stuff. And so some people have even told me that they feel like if they're having depression or problems in their life, people look at them almost as if they are, you know, they've done something bad religiously, and so there's this big thing to sort of like look successful and keep up with the Joneses, and not complain. And I think that's why they use so many antidepressants. FDCC Junior, are you hiring? I can help in the Spanish market. I can't expand there yet, but that is awesome. But you don't need me. I would love for you to just go ahead in the Spanish market and hang up your shingle, get yourself on the Benzo Information Coalition website and on Surviving Antidepressants, and let people know that you want to do this work. We need lots of people doing it. Maybe one day there'll be a taper clinic in Spain or somewhere like that. But until then, I think you might be the man. Yeah. What's the best way to treat brain fog due to long COVID? Exercise and therapy can't cure those things. Not everyone can change careers. Um, shit. Best. Gosh, who's the name of the guy? There's a clinic down in Florida. They. I wish I had my laptop here. Um, what's his name? There's a guy. But I mean, there are dedicated clinics for people with long haul symptoms. Some people even use low dose ketamine if they're having a lot of like brain fog and fatigue from vax injury, like mRNA injury, spike injury. And so some people will try low dose ketamine. I've seen that. But there's a clinic, and I wish I could remember it. It's in Florida. They treat people nationwide. An interview with those guys is coming out on the channel in a couple of months. Doctor in the UK, please. Bumblebee T. Mark Horowitz. Go to Mark Horowitz's clinic in London. Does TMS work? Yeah, TMS does work. I mean, some people say it helps their depression, but the thing with TMS, like many other things, it can have side effects. Um, there's a Facebook group called VTAG. It's Victims of TMS, like Action Group, something like that, and it's a whole bunch of people who have these kind of ECT type injuries from TMS. So some people think TMS, like, oh, TMS, it's safer because it's not a drug. Um, but I've also seen people hurt from that. So yes, it does work, but there still are risks. Brenda Malone, why does bind cause extreme pain? Because it causes global neurological dysfunction. And so a lot of people have crazy neurological pain, like burning and tingling, and they can get it around the ribs and all of that. And so it's just a sign of damaged nerves. All right. Youth, can you stop spamming cure for PSSD? Uh, I, I see the message there, but you're right. You should be frustrated and pissed that there's not a cure for PSSD. and the people at the NIMH who should be actually helping the American public are focusing on essentially drug development. They're just doing biological research. They're not helping people with drug harms. They're not trying to find safer ways to look after people's mental illnesses. And so I'm taking it that you're spamming that because you have PSSD and you think it's bullshit, that there's no cure for it and no one cares. If you feel that way, you are totally justified to feel like that. And I'm sorry that you're in that position. Yeah. Does chronic benzo use cause neuropathy? Yeah, it can for some people. They'll start to notice like tingling in their hands and feet. Marjorie, I don't know much about methylene blue. I know it's super trendy. If anyone in the listening right now has had an experience with methylene blue for Marjorie, she's asking about brain fog and other improvements. Could you just drop it in the chat for her? Because I don't know much about that. Fast way, do heart palpitations go away with antidepressant withdrawal? Yes, they do. I'm sorry that's happened. It will. That is one of the symptoms that will die off. You know, people will describe that they're just like sitting there sometimes, and then all of a sudden their heart will beat like crazy. And it's called autonomic dysfunction. So you have a nervous system in our body called the autonomic nervous system, which innervates parts of the body that aren't under conscious controls, aren't under our conscious control. And so, you know, think about like our stomach and our digestion and the way our blood vessels dilate and constrict and our heart beats. That system can get totally messed up by benzos. And so people will just be sitting in their chair or antidepressants, and then their heart will start beating like, 160 beats per minute, and they're not doing anything, they're not exercising. But thankfully, like with all the symptoms, if you make sure that you don't get you further harm yourself with abrupt tapers or harmful drugs, it will your body will just heal itself. There's really good you have a tremendous capacity to heal. Should I go on Dr. Mike's podcast? I don't think he'd have me on. He'd probably think I'm a total, a total quack. I mean, I know he's got a really big audience, but if you guys, send Dr. Mike, send Dr. Mike my stuff and just say, hey, you should have this guy on. But he's really not the normal type of person that's interested in what I have to say. Timothy Williams is on psych drugs and not having any problems and appreciates the channel. That's awesome. And there are people out there who aren't having problems with the drugs. What I'd say to you, Timothy, is make sure you talk to your doc about the plan of like, I mean, is this forever? Am I going to come off? And if you are going to come off, make gradual steps over time to work on things. But you're right. There's a lot of people out there on meds who aren't having problems, and I'm happy you're not having problems. The missing sock, you can't take any meds or you get a bind flare up. Yeah, that's true. People with protracted withdrawal or bind, their nervous system, it's like a snail without a shell. It's so sensitive. And so people react to foods, they react to like supplements sometimes, and small amounts of meds, and that's really normal. S, how can I come off Seroquel? S, I'd love for you to watch the Beginner's Guide to Tapering Off Psychiatric Meds. But what I'd recommend, if you're on, just start converting some of that Seroquel into a liquid and just gradually bring it down. Yeah, I know Grace Jackson's lectures. She's not really on the scene anymore, but she used to talk a lot about medications causing Alzheimer's. I think she's spot on. She talks about neurotoxicity after long-term use. Shayna says that she works in the foster care system and they put all the kids on 5 different meds, not realizing it's trauma from being removed from their parents. Yeah. Um, that's like a national shame what's happening. When I was back in the, I used to work in the Texas Medical Center and at a place called Ben Taub. It's a pretty rowdy county hospital, and we would get foster kids all the time, and they're just absolutely nuked on psychiatric meds. And I don't know if it's because they don't. I mean, a lot of these kids, if you end up, in a foster home, they may have had trauma growing up. Probably most of them, and I just don't think the schools really want to deal with it. I think the families, they may have multiple kids there and they can't do it. And so when the kids have problems, they go to the doctors and they go, "Who am I? I'll listen to this doctor." And usually, if it's a foster kid, it's probably going to the county place where the doc doesn't have a lot of time, and they just start stacking meds on these kids, and no one really talks to them. It's awful. What are some of the supplements I recommend? Gosh, I'm in two minds about supplements. Like I actually prescribe them to my patients, but it's only something I've been doing for the last couple of years. I and so I'm waiting to notice effects. Like I know that we're all really low on vitamin D. I know the vitamin D is correlated with depression, and so I use vitamin D. I look at omega 3, omega 6 indexes, and I try and fix that with fish oils to lower inflammation. I haven't had any cases yet where it's just like knocked my socks off yet, but I get the concept of supplementing with if you have these deficiencies and fixing them. Um, I know. So lithium orotate, like it just has like a drug effect. I know that one is awesome. I take that one whenever I need to feel more present and more relaxed. Like when my wife, when I have to teach my daughter how to ski so I don't lose it, yeah. With my wife, I take lithium orotate so I can be more present and grounded and be okay with not moving quickly on the mountain. So that one's a winner. Magnesium's also pretty good, but I don't know. I still am in two minds about the supplements. I'm really picky before I go full out and endorse things or say things. It's just kind of the way I am, and that's why you probably notice there's not a lot of supplement videos on my channel because it's really something that I'm still trying to form my opinion on. Jeffrey Riley was told by his doctor that benzos were non-addicting and had no major side effects. Oof. Someone asked the question, is my bipolar diagnosis correct because it happened after I was on 3 years of antidepressants? It might be complete bullshit. And because if you look at the antidepressant labels, it says that there's a lot of, it's right there at the top. It can cause manic switches. And so if you only became manic while you were loaded up with meds that cause mania, you might just be having a side effect to antidepressants, and you need to come off of them. Unfortunately, that's often the only way to know. But be careful if you come off. This is serious stuff. Make sure you do it with someone who's keeping a close eye on you. Crystal, is olanzapine safe long term? I don't think so. I mean, that's the one that causes tardive dyskinesia, which is the permanent movement disorder. It happens at an incidence of around 5% per year. So that's 1 in 20, and that might not go away. And so you'd only ever want to be on an antipsychotic if you tried everything else, like the ketogenic diet, all the other lifestyle interventions. If you've done all those things, then you may take that risk, but it's definitely not a safe medication to be on long term. FDCCC, you sent a job proposal. Well, if you've sent it over, we'll have a look at it. But I mean, I've got my head down at the moment, really trying to just run my small team in the US. And so I may not be able to, but if you've sent something through, I respect that you've done that. I'll have a look, and thank you. I recently heard the LDS Church is like Scientology and doesn't believe in medications. No, the LDS Church loves psychiatric meds. That's one of the things that they're totally cool with. You're on California rocket fuel, venlafaxine, and mirtazapine. Which should you taper first? You should taper the venlafaxine first. I always recommend tapering a stimulant before a sedative, because if you remove the sedative, then the sedative is going to cause anxiety as a withdrawal symptom. And if you have venlafaxine already kind of pushing on, noradrenaline, that might make the taper rougher. So venlafaxine first. Am I opposed to the COVID vaccine? I wouldn't recommend it to anyone. Gosh, I don't think it really worked. Is the first thing. I mean, I got it. I've been mRNA jabbed. Me and my wife, my parents have it as well. My sister, and I regretted getting it. I don't think it did much for me. And because I move in a space where, I see a lot of people who are drug harmed, I've met countless people who've had serious problems from the COVID vaccine. And COVID was really only killing older patients and people who had medical problems. And so, do I oppose the COVID vaccine? Yes. For when it was given to healthy people and young people, I don't think the benefits outweighed the risk. Yeah, I mean, there is an argument like, don't you want herd immunity? I don't think it did shit, really. I think COVID's still all over the place. So I think it was a failure. Doctor has the regular guy look on a Friday night. Well, yeah, I'm in my PJs, and I can't sleep in May. I don't know if anyone else experiences this. When the days get longer, I'm very sensitive to it. And I usually go down at around like midnight, and I wake up at like 4 or 5. And so I'm just up and wired. Yeah. Do you have any experiences tapering phenelzine? Does it require a long taper after decades of use? It probably doesn't. Phenelzine is a very so the MAOIs, they're much dirtier drugs, but they act on multiple neurotransmitters, and they can be quite stimulating. You'll just have to feel it out. Like I don't, I mean, you might start at 10% per month. If you're doing well, bump it up to 15, stay there as long as you can. When you start to get withdrawal symptoms, come down. Generally, stimulating meds are easier to come off and you can come off them faster. And phenelzine is a fairly stimulating MAOI. What's my opinion on biofeedback? I don't know much about it, honestly. I wish I knew more. My wife has done it and she said it was helpful for her. But people, if anyone's done biofeedback, could you drop it in the chat and just let our friend who asked that question know if it was helpful to you? Keto or carnivore for major depression? Um, Maybe keto first, because keto is less restrictive than carnivore. I mean, the way I would do it for major depression is I would do paleo first, so a paleo style diet, and you're going to remove things like soy and gluten. If that hasn't helped you, then you could go to keto, and then finally you could go to carnivore. Carnivore is still keto because it's just high protein, high fat, and no carbs. But the thing with carnivore is it's like the most restrictive and hardcore because you only eat meat, so you remove pretty much anything that you could be allergic to. And so yeah, go keto first and then carnivore. Oliver, I'm thinking about starting Lexapro for intense health anxiety. Do you think it's worth it? That's a really good question. I'm glad that you're thinking about it in that way. I mean, the way I would think about it is, yes, I mean, it's probably going to help your symptoms. It's going to cause emotional constriction, and if you're crippled by high anxiety about your health, then it's going to get rid of that. But the problem that I see with it is that it will wear off over time, and then you have to deal with the weight gain issues. You have to deal with the sexual dysfunction. Some people actually get super blunted long term, and so it's one of these things. It's like, would you be okay being on it long term? And no judgment here. You might totally feel okay with being on it long term if you've done everything else. Now, the main things I would think of would be, see a functional medicine doc, make sure you're not missing any medical problems. You know, stop the caffeine and nicotine. If you're doing that, make sure you're walking 5,000 steps a day. You're getting out in the sun, and just the general things that make people feel better. But if you've done all those things and you're still feeling poorly, then that might be a good trade-off for you, and then that's totally okay. Yeah, benzo withdrawal, the worst symptoms, hypnagogic jerks and hallucinations. Those suck. They're so trippy, and a lot of people have them. And all of they call them toxic naps. Like when you're going to sleep and you just feel jolted awake. It's like, what is my nervous system doing? That's so crazy. Audrey had akathisia for 3 years and she's healed. She did exercise and swimming, and she was able to get off the meds. Um, Congratulations, Audrey. I know we're all really happy for you. Many people listening in right now are probably, where you've come from. And so that's awesome. Desire in life. Doc Mike would love me. I don't know about that. We'll see. I think he'd challenge me. Yeah. Tara Payne. Aloha from Kauai. That's cool. I'd love to go there someday. Brittany says, what do you think of somatic work while tapering for depersonalization? I think you could try it. I mean, it could be really triggering. The, for a lot of people who have protracted withdrawal or are going through tapers, it's always hard to know what your nervous system is going to be able to handle. And so I generally tell people, don't feel like you need to go out and be really intense with doing like some trauma therapy or something like that, because it could just be overwhelming. You might just need support while you're healing. But if you feel compelled to try something like that, just ease into it, and just, you're not a failure if you can't do it because your nervous system can't handle it yet. But like with many things like socializing or exercising or kind of getting out and about, if you've had a damaged nervous system or you're in withdrawal, you just have to test the waters and see what you can handle. And so just try it if you feel ready. I have bind and I want to know if the tinnitus will go away. Doreen, there's a good chance that it will. For the majority of the patients I see, they have a full recovery or a near full recovery. In quite rare cases, I know some people where it's stayed on, but if I was a betting man, I would bet that it would go away, because that's what's happening with most of my patients. I'm sorry that's happened. Anna Matos, what's your advice for dealing with people who don't believe psych meds can be this bad? My family won't believe me and are not talking to me because I've tried everything. Well, so well, I'm sorry, that's super isolating if your family doesn't believe you. I'm just thinking about this guy from India who I interviewed. He was a medical student and he developed PSSD. This also happened to a young woman called Rosie Tilley in Australia. She's with the PSSD network. Their families thought that they were delusional. So they would say, I've developed this problem, I've got persistent sexual dysfunction, I'm not well. The doctors they saw were just like, oh yeah, the psych drugs can't do this, they have a delusional disorder. They were involuntarily hospitalized. And I mean, talk about the most traumatic rupture that could happen. You're living your life and all of a sudden you develop a severe adverse reaction, and it messes up your sexual functioning. You have high anxiety and cognitive dysfunction, and then you go to your parents and you're just like, this terrible thing has happened, and instead of them believing you, they sort of, they take you to a psych doctor. The psych doctor tells you you're delusional, and you end up on an involuntary commitment in a psychiatric hospital. I mean, talk about like waking up into an actual horror movie. And so it's just awful. I mean, it's happened to people, and in both cases now, though, the parents have come around, and they were able to eventually let them know what had happened. You kind of need to be persistent, and maybe some people they just don't want to hear it, like especially if like a parent has put the kid on the medication, and they it's just easier for them to be like, oh no, it's just you're crazy, because it's too painful for them to see it. It's super hard. You kind of have to just read your family and see whether it's worth pushing or whether it's just more harm than good. But again, I'm really sorry that's happening. Okay. All right, y'all. I'm gonna try and knock out. I will try do more of these lives during the insomnia month of May. Really appreciate all of the kind comments that you guys posted here, and I'll see you next time on the live. But take care, everybody.